Person one, the leader of the Oath Keepers, is a guy named Stewart Rhodes. And yes, that is him with the eye patch. You will be shocked to learn it had something to do with the unsafe handling of firearms. Yeah, a little accident with a gun. That's what happened to the eye. But ever since the 2020 presidential election, as 17 Oath Keepers were arrested and charged for attacking the Capitol in various capacities, as some of those Oath Keepers pled guilty and signed cooperation deals with federal prosecutors, throughout all of this time, the Oath Keepers leader with the eye patch, this guy Stewart Rhodes, has been unavoidable for comment. He has been loudly telling any reporter who gets anywhere near him that, yes, the election was absolutely stolen from Donald Trump, and yes, he absolutely encouraged Oath Keepers to be in D.C. on January 6th, and yes, he was there at the Capitol that day communicating with his fellow Oath Keepers, but he always takes pains to say that he definitely did not break the law because he is way too smart to have done anything illegal. Well, today, Stewart Rhodes was arrested just after lunchtime in Texas. That's his mugshot. Another Oath Keeper guy was arrested in Phoenix around the same time. And they, along with 9 other Oath Keepers who had already been arrested and charged in the Capitol attack in various capacities, the 11 of them today were all indicted on the very serious charge of seditious conspiracy. Now, seditious conspiracy is a charge that derives from the concept of sedition, right? It is a charge that prosecutors have been openly mulling since the very beginning of the investigation. You might remember when the Justice Department used to do briefings for the public and the press in the immediate aftermath of the attack, they talked not infrequently at those briefings about seditious conspiracy as a potential charge. They did that right away. But now it is, of course, more than a year after the attack. This is the first time they've actually used it in the indictment unsealed today. And seditious conspiracy basically means a conspiracy to commit sedition, a conspiracy against the government. Specifically, the way that's written in the statute, it's a conspiracy to stop the government from carrying out its laws by force. Here's how the indictment describes it. They call it the plot to oppose by force the 2020 lawful transfer of presidential power. Quote, beginning in November 2020, Rhodes, defendant Stewart Rhodes, began disseminating messages on encrypted applications that encouraged his co-conspirators to oppose by force the lawful transfer of November 5th, 2020, 2 days after the presidential election, Mr. Rhodes urged his followers to refuse to accept the election result and stated, quote, we aren't getting through this without a civil war. Too late for that. Prepare your mind, body, spirit. On 2 days later, on November 7th, 2020, the day that President Trump was projected to have lost the presidential election, Mr. Rhodes wrote to fellow Oath Keepers, quote, we must now do what the people of Serbia did when Milosevic stole their election, refuse to accept it, and march en masse on the nation's capital. He spelled en masse wrong, but that's okay. Mr. Rhodes appears to be, in those comments, referring to the storming of the Serbian parliament in 2000. Mr. Rhodes shared with his followers a video and step-by-step instruction guide to overthrowing the government that he said he received from a Serbian activist. That step-by-step guide specifically included storming the parliament. In our country, we don't call it the parliament. We call it the Capitol because it's how it houses our Congress. But same idea. The indictment continues, quote, on December 11th, 2020, Rhodes sent a message to fellow Oath Keepers that stated that if President Biden were to assume the presidency, quote, it will be a bloody and desperate fight. We are going to have a fight. That can't be avoided. On December 25th, Merry Christmas, Mr. Rhodes wrote, quote, I think Congress will screw him, meaning screw President Trump, over. The only chance we/he has is if we scare the out of them and convince them it will be torches and pitchforks time if they don't do the right thing. But I don't think they will listen. On December 31st, Happy New Year, an Arizona Quick Reaction Force team member messaged Mr. Rhodes on Signal that people were coming to Washington, D.C., and that, quote, everyone coming has their own technical equipment and knows how to use it, adding a winky face emoji. Mr. Rhodes responded, awesome! The Arizona Oath Keeper also said the group would have rifles and manpower. On January 6th itself, Mr. Stewart Rhodes and his fellow Oath Keepers did all go to Washington. Many of them were apparently stationed with what they called these quick reaction forces just outside the district, where they'd stockpiled weapons, presumably ready to be able to access them on short notice and come blazing in. And these stacks of Oath Keepers began heading toward the Capitol and up the Capitol steps, become the sort of point of the spear for actually breaking into the seat of the nation's government. According to today's indictment, there was not one, but two stacks of Oath Keepers who breached the Capitol at different places. Apparently, one part of one of those stacks was specifically looking to try to find Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The indictment says, quote, just before 1:30 p.m., in response to a claim by an Oath Keepers affiliate that Antifa had breached the Capitol, Mr. Rhodes replied, quote, nope, I'm right here. These are patriots. Rhodes then wrote, quote, Pence is doing nothing. As I predicted, all I see Trump doing is complaining. I see no intent by him to do anything. So the patriots are taking it into their own hands. They've had enough. At approximately 1:30 p.m., Oath Keepers affiliates on the chat group with Mr. Rhodes posted messages about police officers deploying pepper spray at the Capitol and questioned what the rioters hoped would happen if they got inside the Capitol. A person with Rhodes at the time responded, quote, we are acting like the Founding Fathers. Can't stand down. Stewart and I concur. Mr. Rhodes followed, quote, hey, the founding generation stormed the governor's mansion in Massachusetts and tarred and feathered his tax collectors, and they seized and dumped tea in the water. They didn't fire on them, but they street fought. That's where we are now. Next comes our Lexington. It's coming. Just one more thing I just want to share with you from today's indictment, because it actually continues beyond January 6th. There's a section of the indictment titled, Co-Conspirators Continue Plotting After the January 6th Attack on the Capitol. Quote, throughout the evening of January 6th, 2021, the co-conspirators discussed the need to continue fighting to stop the lawful transfer of presidential power. In the weeks after January 6th, Rhodes purchased a large volume of firearms and related equipment. The indictment then lists thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars worth of sights and bipods and scopes and mounts and backpacks and gun grips, ammunition, firearms parts, gun cases, holsters, and gun maintenance equipment, all purchased by Mr. Rhodes at that time. You see the dates there. January 10, January 11, January 12, January 13, January 14 through 19. Adding up all the purchases listed in the indictment that Rhodes made of firearms and related equipment over that short burst of time, he spent something like $40,000 right around January 6th just on weaponry. Quote, on Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2021, one Oath Keeper messaged another, quote, after this, if nothing happens, it's war, Civil War 2.0. Around this time, quote, Mr. Rhodes messaged others to organize local militias to oppose President Biden's administration. For the Oath Keepers, January 6th was not the end point. It was apparently the beginning of a new phase of their fight against the government. As of today, 11 of them are facing seditious conspiracy charges, which is a serious felony count brought by U.S. federal prosecutors in Washington, D.C.